Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's video, I want to talk to you about both Russia and China. And the reason that I want to focus in on both of these is because of a new war that's developing in technology. And the main focus of this technology war is microchips or semiconductors. Because microchips are used in absolutely everything these days. This is what's referred to as smart technology. So you may have heard about smart TVs, now we've got smart cars, we've got smart everything. And the reason that these products are referred to as smart is because the microchips within them enable these products to be able to do things, either talk to computers and learn and do things differently, or more likely going forward, the products themselves will have artificial intelligence. So the microchips that are built into them will be able to learn and develop and expand their knowledge. And the companies that produce AI microchips are predominantly from the West. So this technology is being licensed by the West to other countries around the world. But what we're seeing right now, partly as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and partly because of the lack of trust between China and the USA, is a division. The companies that are producing these AI microchips are being told that they're no longer able to supply them either to Russia or China. And this is going to cause both of those countries technological problems going forward. So in today's video, I want to go through this in a bit more detail. We'll go through exactly what microchips with artificial intelligence are, who's producing them, what countries they're from, and why they're going to be useful going forward. We'll have a look at the practical applications of these developments and talk about which sectors could benefit the most. We'll then talk about the technology sanctions that are in place against Russia and what the implications of that are for the Russian economy. We'll then talk about what's going on with regards to China, because the USA has recently changed its position. And then finally today we'll wrap up with my summary as to what I think the implications of this are for Russia, China and the global economy. So what is a microchip and why is it so important? A microchip is a small electronic device that controls and stores electronic data. It is made up of a silicon chip that has been fabricated into a very small size. Silicon is a material found in nature and is very good at conducting electricity, which makes it the perfect choice for microchips so they can quickly store and process information. An AI chip is a microchip designed for artificial intelligence applications, and they have been specifically designed to handle high computation demands of training and running deep neural networks. The basic premise behind an AI chip is what's referred to as machine learning. AI chips can handle trillions of operations per second and can learn and train and develop quicker and more efficiently than humans. Now, as I mentioned at the start of the video, the companies that are producing AI microchips are predominantly from the West. The USA has multiple large companies including Nvidia, AMD, Google, Apple, Intel, IBM. All of these companies are producing highly specialized AI chips that can't be reproduced easily anywhere else in the world. UK-based companies ARM and Graphcore are also two major suppliers, as are Tokyon Electron from Japan, ASML from the Netherlands, TAIWAN Semiconductors from Taiwan, and LG and Samsung from South Korea. Now, you may be sitting there waiting for me to reel off a whole lot of Chinese companies, because I think everybody's perspective is that most semiconductors, microchips, this sort of technology are produced very cheaply. But in the world of microchips, there is a very wide spectrum in terms of the highly technological end right through to the very basic types of chips. So in order to give you a better understanding as to how the market works, I'll give you a comparison against the pharmaceuticals market. So in the world of pharmaceuticals, we've got a whole spectrum in terms of the types of drugs that are available. At the very bottom end, you've got basic drugs like paracetamol that are freely available everywhere and produced by hundreds of different companies, all the way through to the very specialist types of cancer treatments and treatments for COVID that have been developed over the course of the last couple of years. Now, when pharmaceutical companies make a breakthrough, they want to keep that for themselves because that's the most lucrative end of the market. And that's really the pinnacle of all of the research that they've been doing over the course of the last 50 years or so. Research builds upon research. You take a breakthrough that's been made by somebody and try to take it to the next level. And then once you make a breakthrough and prove that a new drug works, you want to keep that all to yourself. You don't want to share any of that data or information with anybody else. And there are rules and laws in place to protect all of your patents. And that's exactly the same situation for the world of microchips. At the very basic end of the market, you've got people who are producing very simple microchips. And there's not a lot of profit in that end of the market. So it's really mass production. And a lot of that is done in China because that's the cheapest place to be able to do it. But at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the AI chips, and these are groundbreaking technology, and it is very difficult to be able to produce. And it's at that end of the market that we're getting groundbreaking developments in terms of chips that can learn quickly, do things quickly, and take us to the next level of technology. And that end of the market is dominated by the West, and that's the end of the market that the West does not want China or Russia to have going forward. So it is correct to say that a lot of microchips are produced in China and they are freely available. But the specialized chips, which are very difficult to create and get right and be able to produce on a commercial basis, are dominated by companies from the West. So what's the point of AI chips? Why do we need them? Well, the reason that they're so important is that they're helping to improve everything. So these can be used in any industry whatsoever. So the most simple and easiest to understand technology functions are mobile phones, computers, all of the things that we're using on a daily basis. These chips enable our phones and devices to develop better software, to run faster, to learn what we're doing so it can predict what we want to see when we switch our phones on, all of those sort of things. So this is really just fun social stuff, which does have some business implications. But in terms of improving everybody's life, obviously there's lots of applications for healthcare, so we can learn how to do things better, how to develop better drugs, how to develop better technology to deal with patients, all of those sort of things. AI chips can be used to develop better education and learning around the globe, and they can be used for power and energy sources to help develop better renewable energy, faster processing, more efficient processing, less emissions, all of these sort of things. So lots of really positive things. But obviously, anything that can be used in those fields can also be used in the field of defense. So it can be used to develop better radars, better communication, better tracking systems, and it can also be used on autonomous vehicles. Companies like Tesla and Google are developing driverless cars so you can sit back and relax and let your car drive you from A to B. Although personally, I'm not entirely sure who on earth is wanting a driverless car, but anyway, they keep working on that technology. But when you apply driverless technology to the world of defense and weapon systems, it means that you can put that sort of technology onto a drone or some form of aircraft or a tank that doesn't have to have any personnel within it. And that sort of weaponry can then obviously be used in warfare. And this is one of the concerns from the West's perspective, is that this AI technology could be used for negative purposes. It could be used firstly to develop more longer range and more technically advanced weapons. And secondly, it could be used to disarm and disable other people's defense systems. So this is where the concerns are starting to be raised for Russia and China. Now, as you'll be aware if you followed the channel, Russia has been facing a lot of technology sanctions since its invasion of Ukraine. However, this isn't the first round of technology sanctions that have been applied against Russia. Russia invaded Crimea back in 2014 and then subsequently annexed that whole area, and it's been deemed to be part of Russia ever since. And as a direct result of that, the USA introduced a variety of technology sanctions against Russia, and these were followed up by the EU and the UK. And these sanctions were put together predominantly to prevent Russia from being able to access AI and other microchip technology that could be used in defense systems, so weaponry and other forms of attack. And it's really interesting to note that at that time, President Putin instructed his technology guys to set up their own development systems, to build research to make these chips themselves. However, over the last 8 years, Russia has been entirely unsuccessful in being able to do that. It is still importing all of its chips. So this really gives you a flavour as to how difficult it is to be able to create this sort of technology. You might be able to get hold of some of it, and therefore you think it would be easy to replicate it. But because these things are so technologically advanced, it's not just a case of breaking it down and then copying it. You need to have the skills and the research to be able to put these things together from scratch, and Russia doesn't have that. Now, in terms of the latest round of technology sanctions, these are far more wide-ranging. So they're not just focused on defense-related chips these days, it's any form of technology. And Russia has been sanctioned entirely since the start of this war. So they're no longer able to legitimately get hold of any of the chips that they've needed historically. And this is a major problem for Russia because a lot of their oil and gas industry relies upon this form of advanced technology. If you've been following the channel, you'll know that a lot of the Russian oil and gas facilities are based in inhospitable places. They are operating in very cold climates and they have technological problems. So they need to have advanced technology to be able to get around all of this, to give them the warning systems and to be able to handle all of the different strains and stresses that those systems come under. And Russia no longer has any of that. It was reported that Russia was stockpiling some of this technology prior to its invasion of Ukraine. So it may well have a supply to see it through a certain amount of time. But the problem that Russia's facing is that it won't be able to get replacements going forward. So as and when these chips fail or they have problems, they won't be able to sort those problems out. So that will cause them an immediate problem. But the bigger issue is that they won't be able to keep moving forward. They won't be able to keep developing at the same rate as the rest of the world. And that's going to be a major problem for Russia in the longer term. Now, in terms of China, the USA has been concerned for a long period of time that the technology that is owned by US companies, that is licensed, is being copied. And so they're concerned that if they continue supplying these high-end chips, that China will break them down, find a way to be able to replicate them, and essentially steal that technology. So in order to protect the long-term intellectual property rights, the US authorities have banned Chinese companies from buying certain chips. The Biden administration published a sweeping set of export controls, including a measure to cut China off from certain semiconductor chips made anywhere in the world with US equipment in a bid to slow Beijing's technological and military advances. This will set the Chinese back years, said Jim Lewis, a technology and cybersecurity expert at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a Washington, D.C. based think tank, who said the policies harken back to the tough regulations of the height of the Cold War. China isn't going to give up on chip making, but this will really slow them down. The rules also block shipments of a broad array of chips for use in Chinese supercomputing systems. The rules define a supercomputer as any system with more than 100 petaflops of computing power with a floor space of 6,400 square feet, a definition that two industry sources said could also hit some commercial data centers at Chinese tech giants. The new regulations also severely restrict export of US equipment to Chinese memory chip makers, and letters to Nvidia and AMD restricting shipments to China of chips used in supercomputing systems that nations around the world rely on to develop nuclear weapons and other military technologies. Following these restrictions, the USA is now in advanced talks with Japan and the Netherlands about tightening exports of semiconductor manufacturing equipment to China. China is Tokyo Electron's largest market, accounting for 26% of its sales of $14.1 billion in chip-making equipment for the year ending March 2022. For Japanese chip testing equipment maker Advanced Test Corp, China is the second largest market after Taiwan, representing around 27% of all sales. ASML, the Dutch company, said in November that its financial outlook through to 2030 would not be impacted by a total ban on equipment sales to China, as the company could sell 15% of its order backlog currently destined for Chinese customers elsewhere. In a further development which underlines the current ties between Japan and USA, IBM Corp and Rapidus, a newly formed chip maker backed by Japan, unveiled a partnership this week which aims to make the world's most advanced chips in Japan by the second half of this decade. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to make this video because we're seeing things changing in the global economy. I've been talking about the globe being interconnected for the last 12 months or so. And it is, and that's the best way forward. That is the most efficient way for everybody to operate. You have areas of specialism all around the world, whether it be in raw material supply or development or technology or education, whatever it might be, and you share the benefits of all of that with everybody else. That's how things should work. But unfortunately, things are starting to fall apart. Firstly, we had Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which meant that we had a global split. The West suddenly sanctioned Russia. They didn't want to deal with Russia. And so we've seen changes to the global supply chain for energy and a variety of other products. But we're now seeing other things starting to emerge. And one of the things that's really important, not just raw materials such as oil and gas and wheat, but we're now talking about technological developments, understanding and research. And the USA is at the forefront of the AI chip market. The majority of the companies that are developing these sort of chips are based in the USA. And the USA no longer wants to share the benefit of that development and research with Russia or China. And this is going to cause problems for both of those countries. From Russia's perspective, the biggest single revenue earner is energy products, oil and natural gas. But because a lot of those fields are in inhospitable places, Russia needs advanced technology to be able to keep all of the flows moving. And now it's lost the access to those chips, it's going to cause major problems. And as I mentioned earlier, Russia tried to develop its own chip manufacturing business around 8 years ago and has failed in that. So this isn't something that Russia can just do itself. It's either buying it from the USA or it's not having access to any of that advanced technology. And that could cause breakdowns and problems with their sites, and that would then mean a massive reduction in revenues, and that would cause the economy of Russia to have major issues. So it's really, really important to Russia to have access, and obviously it's impossible to be able to get that. So the only other way that Russia could get it is through the back door, some form of black market for this type of technology. And the issue of IP protection really takes us on to the relationship between the USA and China. The USA is concerned that China is trying to take this technology and develop its own. And obviously China has a lot of people and a lot of research, so it's in a better position than Russia to be able to do that. And that's what's been happening slowly over the course of the last 10 years or so. And the USA is now trying to clamp down on this. And it's told all of the US companies that had Chinese operations where it was making those chips to close those down, to keep everything within the borders of the USA, because it doesn't want that IP to be copied on a rapid basis. It will obviously happen over time, but it's going to be more difficult to be able to replicate what's happening at the cutting edge of AI technology if the facilities are not on site in China. And that's exactly what Joe Biden wants. And he's now trying to persuade Japan, the Netherlands, the UK, other countries to follow suit and to prevent all of this technology actually being produced on Chinese soil. So what are the implications of this for Russia, China and the global economy? Well, as I mentioned, from Russia's perspective, I think there's now a really high risk that as they've lost all of that technology, that Russia will start going backwards. And if they start having problems with production on their big oil and gas facilities, they could see themselves losing a lot of revenue. And Russia's already officially in recession. And if they see their revenues falling further because they have production problems rather than problems finding new markets, then that will obviously speed up the pace of the recession and cause further problems in the Russian markets. Now, from China's perspective, the economy there is also slowing down rapidly. They started having problems in the property sector. That's now seeped across into the general economy. So China really needs to keep developing its own technology moving forward to be able to grow its economy. And the fact that it's had the access to all of this technology cut off will cause it a problem for two reasons. Firstly, it won't be able to access those chips to be able to put into its own products. So that's likely to slow down the sales and reduce revenue. And secondly, it won't be able to develop its own chip market as rapidly if it doesn't have access to all of that technology. So this is going to be a double whammy from China's point of view and won't help with the current economic problems. Now, in terms of the impact on the global market, what we're seeing here is a further fragmentation of the global economy. So I like to talk about that interconnected world. Unfortunately, that interconnected world is becoming quite broken right now. And it might be that we're going back towards more of a Cold War era that we saw in the 70s and the 80s, where we had the West and the East, and the two of them didn't do a lot of business together. And if we are moving back towards that sort of model, that's bad news for the global economy, because the reason that we're interconnected is because that's the most efficient and the cheapest way of doing things. If the world is now becoming more insular and dealing within its own shores, then that will push up prices, which will drive up inflation, which is likely to lead to more interest rate increases, which is likely to lead to higher costs of living and therefore lower disposable income and a further slowdown. So these sort of developments are going to be negative and are going to make things worse over the course of the next 6 to 12 months. In the longer term, they will also make things worse because this is a permanent change. If this is happening, if we are seeing the West breaking away from Russia and China and everybody becoming more independent, then it's likely to raise long-term costs and mean that the recovery is likely to take longer and be slower. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it interesting, useful and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.